What's going on, everyone? So when it comes to the trade that went down yesterday, the Damian Lillard trade is the aspect of it that is going to get the most attention. It's the biggest impact, right? Because you just gave Giannis one of the best scorers in the entire league. Milwaukee was already one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league, and one of the teams that was most likely to come out of the Eastern Conference, potentially win an NBA championship. And then they had a guy in Damian Lillard for basically Grayson Allen and Drew Holiday, which, don't get me wrong, those two guys are good defensively, especially Drew Holiday is very good defensively and was a big part of the Milwaukee Bucks, but you're just adding a completely different element to the Bucks that they've never had before and gives them that closer that they've desperately needed the last few years. But the other part of this deal was the swap for DeAndre Ayton and Nurk, right? Now, obviously there were more pieces than that, but this is the big sort of swap and acquisition, right? The Phoenix Suns got, a couple players that were attached to it that none of them are really going to make a huge impact. Little, maybe he has a little bit of a role and actually plays in some of the rotation. He, I believe, had like an Achilles, is coming off an Achilles a couple years ago. So how does that look? But for the most part, it was the swap of Nurk and then DeAndre Ayton. And then for the Portland Trailblazers, I mean, it makes sense. They wanted to get off of Nurk's contract. You got Drew Holiday that now you can go look to maybe trade to some contender, get another draft pick or a couple pieces, maybe some young talent back. And then you also got a young 20 and 10 center that could really make an impact now and for the future. But what are the ins and outs with this deal? Did one team get the upper hand, right? Because usually there's a winner and a loser in these type of deals. And starting with the Portland Trailblazers, right? Now, Portland, as I mentioned, got a 20 and 10 center that the year going into when they went to the NBA Finals looked like a guy that had the potential to be one of the top centers in this league. And he's had his struggles, but he's still been really good. Even last year, shot 58.9% from the field, 18 points, 10 rebounds, and just under 2 assists, 1.7 assists. He's a legit 7-footer with a 7'6" wingspan, and he's 25 years old. So he fits the Portland Trailblazers timeline beautifully because now you got your cornerstone in Scoot Henderson, which if he is anything close to what he's projected to be, I mean, you're talking about a guy that could be a top 10, maybe top 20 player at the worst in the next handful of years. You still have Sharp and Simons and Murray and Jeremy Grant, who, I'm sure that they regret that signing now, but I do think that he had some value as just a vet and a guy that can play both forward spots, gives you a little more stability, right? So now you have, my guess, a starting five looks like, Henderson, Sharp, maybe you go Murray, Grant, and Ayton. That's probably my guess as far as that goes. Maybe you go with a little defense and you go with like a Thibault. You could even do, if you want to do like Sharp at the 3 and then maybe start Simons and have him kind of just operate as a scorer. They still have some young guys in like Kevin Knox. They still have him. So there's flexibility there as far as it goes. But it's more so about having that core that now you can carry on to the future, right? You're unloading Damian Lillard. Your plan is to rebuild now. Your plan is to put your franchise in a position to, in the next 3 to 5 years, be a legit contender or maybe be a piece away from being a legit contender. And Portland can finally right the ship. They did a terrible job with Damian Lillard. I mean, they were constantly overpaying for mid-tier talent, right? You see them overpay for Nicholas Batum and Robert Covington and all that stuff. And the biggest issue was that they made a conference final because it justified the decisions that they made. But we've seen teams get to the conference finals that didn't necessarily deserve it. The dice just kind of rolled their way, and they've never been the same. And that was Portland, right? They made the conference finals, and they were never the same, right? And you look at teams like Atlanta, same thing. And they're fighting for a play-in spot. Look at a team like the Denver or the Dallas Mavericks, right? They end up making a conference finals and they didn't even make the play-in last year, right? So it's like that became an issue. And they never had the flexibility to go get that other star or go get that other piece that could maybe come in and kind of solidify the Portland Trailblazers. I mean, the best player Damian Lillard ever played with was CJ McCollum, who is a worse version of Damian Lillard, right? Like, that's terrible. And so now you have a guy that is your franchise guy in Scoot Henderson. You have a guy who is a legit center and DeAndre Ayton. You have a solid veteran perimeter guy that could be a true 3-and-D in Jeremy Grant and go get you 20 a game. You got a nice young prospect with tremendous upside in Sharp. Like, Sharp has the potential to be a real player, right? Like, I think personally, and this is just my thoughts, I think that they should look to obviously trade Drew Holiday, but I think they should look to move Simons and see if they could get some quality pieces and or maybe even some draft picks to kind of like get some depth and just really kind of go in with Scoot Henderson, Sharp, and DeAndre Ayton. And that's basically your big three. Jeremy Grant, again, I get is a part of this roster for the next like 4 years or whatever, but he's very likely not going to be in the plans as far as the future goes. I think that they'll look to move off of him as soon as they can. It's probably not happening anytime soon, right? And he is still relatively young. You know, he's 29 years old. By the time his contract's up, he'll be, 33, 34. So it's not like he's super old, but he has a player option in the 2027, 2028 year. And my guess is that he actually opts into that. But you basically have 5 years, very likely, of Jeremy Grant. And then I think more likely 4 years. And at that point, your hope is that these guys have come into their own to where now you can really start contending for NBA championships. You either wait for Jeremy Grant to unload and fall off, and now you could go get that missing piece, or you already have all that stuff, and then you look to just move him to try to get some depth and maybe get some, help some teams out with some salary flexibility or something like that, right? That's kind of the idea. And you hope that Sharp or maybe Murray or somebody can kind of take that next step in the next few years. Scoot kind of projects to be the guy that he is supposed to be. And then DeAndre Ayton at least just stays where he's at, right? As like a legit 2010 guy. And you're good, right? And if you handle things the right way and you don't overpay for guys, and in 4 years, you are, say a 3 seed in the Western Conference, and you're one of the better teams, and you're a piece away. It's the old saying, if you build it, they will come, right? Like, Portland isn't this huge desirable destination, but they also haven't put themselves in a position to where they could get that guy that looks at them and goes, man, like, you got Scoot Henderson, Sharp is an absolute monster, DeAndre Ayton, 2010 guy. Like, I could slot in right there, right next to them at like the 3 spot or whatever, and boom, we off to the races, right? We go win a championship, right? I'm not saying that necessarily will happen, but how do you know if you don't put yourself in that position, right? So I'm hopeful that Portland kind of goes in the right direction, does the right things here. And I do think that Ayton makes a world of sense because all of the issues that Ayton had with the Phoenix Suns, he shouldn't have with the Portland Trailblazers. One, he has a coach in Chauncey Billups that has no problem telling him to go F himself, right? He's also going to be the number 2 option, very likely. Maybe at worst number 3 because Jeremy Grant will probably get his. But I do imagine Ayton is a big part of the offense and a big fixture. So that was one of his biggest issues and complaints with the Phoenix Suns is that, I'm not getting the touches. Everybody's taking up and jacking shots up and isolating, and I'm down there establishing position for nothing, right? That was his biggest complaint. And that was before they got Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant, which is why I was preaching. If you've been subscribed to this channel for long enough, you've heard me say repeatedly, I would be shocked if DeAndre Ayton is on the Phoenix Suns roster going into the season. And look, here we are. And then I said I would be incredibly shocked if he finishes the year, if that even happens. And yet, here we are. So I do think that this was a huge acquisition for Portland. Could they have gotten more? Yeah, probably. because the Phoenix Suns trade you could have done regardless. Like whether you did a deal with Miami or you did a deal with Toronto or you did a deal with somebody else that came out of the woodworks, you could have done this regardless. So it is kind of strange from a Portland perspective as far as Dame goes. But, as far as swapping Nurk for Ayton, it works for both sides. And the reason it works for Phoenix, and I've seen a lot of people talk about like, why would Phoenix want to get worse? And that's not what happened here. Now, talent-wise, 1-to-1, yes, DeAndre Ayton is the better center with the long-term upside and stuff like that compared to Nurk. So if you are just casually looking at it from that perspective, then sure. But it's not just about talent. We have seen many teams, especially teams like the Lakers, as a Laker fan, every other year, the Lakers put together a team that on paper looks like give them the trophy now, and they don't win, right? So it's not about just acquiring the most talent possible. It's about fit. It's about role. It's about, buying in and being a locker room guy. What the Phoenix Suns did is they got rid of the problem before the problem arose. DeAndre Ayton was already an issue, already a problem, causing issues in the locker room, was bumping heads with Monty Williams and Chris Paul and everyone, and they got rid of those guys, which I think is funny because, they end up trading Ayton. But nonetheless, I think that they should have kept Monty Williams. But you look at a guy like Frank Vogel, Monty Williams had issues with Ayton and bumping heads. And Monty Williams is a player coach, but also a guy that doesn't take nonsense. Frank Vogel, again, this is coming from a guy that's a Laker fan, has a Laker channel, all that stuff, right? Frank Vogel is non-confrontational. And we heard the reports when he was with the Lakers after Jason Kidd left, because Jason Kidd was that guy that was getting in players' faces and telling them to knock it off. And it also helped that they had, a Rajon Rondo and, Dwight Howard and, these veteran guys, Jared Dudley and stuff. But Phoenix doesn't have that, right? Like Kevin Durant is very passive and non-aggressive. Devin Booker, he's got, a little fire in him, but he's not over there telling DeAndre Ayton to, shut it and stuff like that. And Frank Vogel's not going to be that guy. So you have a guy that could potentially be a locker room issue, that his whole entire frustration is him and his lack of touches and him not getting the opportunity in the offense. And that was before you got Kevin Durant and then swapped Chris Paul for Bradley Beal, who is not a traditional point guard. At least Chris Paul is a traditional point guard that was trying to get Ayton the ball at times. So how do you think DeAndre Ayton is going to respond then? On top of that, it's about fit. Nurk is the better fit. He's a guy that's not going to complain about his touches. He's a slightly better defensive guy. He's not like a leader or anything like that, but he is better than DeAndre Ayton. And he's a much better passer and playmaker out of the post, which is something Phoenix needs desperately. They don't have a real point guard. But now what you can do that you couldn't do with DeAndre Ayton, because as soon as DeAndre Ayton got the basketball, he was going to go look for his shot. You can actually use Nurk as like your point center and operate him in a sort of poor man Jokic way. And he would be surrounded with Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker. That is massive, right? So that is, as far as the fit goes, it's just a better fit. Nurk has the potential to unlock the Phoenix Suns much better than DeAndre Ayton would, because Nurk fits what they need more. They don't need a 2010 center. You don't need that. You need a guy that can rebound, defend, and hit the occasional shot, but also make plays out of the post, where you can dump it down to them, and then they can kick it out to Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Eric Gordon, Watanabe, whomever, right? Like, that's what you're looking for. And that's what they got here in a Nurk. This was a perfect acquisition for the Phoenix Suns. I talked repeatedly about how I wasn't bought into the Phoenix Suns. I didn't think that they would work well. I still am not fully. I still think that there are a lot of question marks and concerns, but I think the likelihood of Phoenix working and being great just got a lot more improved because of Nurk. Because all of the issues that DeAndre Ayton presents the Phoenix Suns, Nurk doesn't provide any of those. And he is the better fit with what this team and how this team is built. The biggest concern is his injury history. He has not been great injury-wise, but neither has pretty much all the stars on, not that Nurk is a star, but the stars on Phoenix, right? Kevin Durant, he's been incredibly injury prone. So has Bradley Beal. And even Devin Booker's struggled a little bit here. But regardless, this was huge for them because it gave them a quality center that they're not really losing much, because the production that he gives you is, on the offensive end at least, is probably the same that DeAndre Ayton would have given. Because why would you give Ayton 20 shots a game when you have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal? You're not. DeAndre Ayton would probably be lucky to get 8 to 10 attempts per game. And you think he's going to be happy about that? Absolutely not. But you know what? Nurk won't care. He'll be totally okay with it. Because it doesn't matter to him. He wants to win. He'll play whatever's role asked of him. Right? And now Phoenix, still not super sold on their depth. Like I said, I don't think the other guys that they acquired are really going to be these like massive impact guys. But I do think that they at least have bodies, which is important. Right? They got some bodies that at this point in the Phoenix Suns scenario, that's what they need. They needed as many bodies as possible. And just to be able to throw at various teams and, give some of these guys, the Bradley Beals, the Devin Bookers, the Kevin Durants, some just rest, right? But, Grayson Allen, I think he can make an impact. I think he's a solid guy. Little, as I mentioned earlier, he's kind of hit or miss to me. Keon Johnson, I don't think he ever even plays, but, time will tell. But again, it's just bodies. But this, in my opinion, was a win-win for both sides, because I think that this gave both sides exactly what they needed, right? Very rarely does a trade actually benefit and make both sides better. And that's what I think this did. Blazers, they're in the rebuild stage. Now they got their center of the future. That's perfect. They got a legit 2010 center. The Phoenix Suns are in win now mode and need the best fit and player that gives them that opportunity. And that's what Nurk does. So in my opinion, it's a no-brainer win-win for both sides. Again, it's not just a paper for paper, 1-for-1, right? And I think that that's how a lot of people are looking at this. Why would the Phoenix Suns trade for a worse player? It's not about him being worse or not. It's about the fit. You don't need, as I mentioned earlier, you don't need a 2010 center. You don't need that. Because he's not going to be that with this Phoenix Suns roster. He's just not. So you're not going to be able to utilize him at what he's best at. Right? But Nurk is a guy that is okay with that, and his strengths are things that Phoenix desperately needs. So this was a huge deal for Phoenix. And this is coming from a guy that has not as much belief in Phoenix as many other people do. Again, I still have a lot of questions about them. I still think they're going to be bad defensively. Still question their depth. I think they did a better job than I thought they would this offseason as far as adding depth. But I still am not completely sold, and I still need to see how does Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant even work and look. But on paper, give them the trophy. But time will tell. Anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Agree with me, disagree with me, somewhere in between. Love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments.